As always, a lot to get to with the mayor of Kansas City. Quinton Lucas is here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM and always streaming at KCMOTalkRadio.com or on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Well, Mr. Mayor, it's always good to have you here. We appreciate the time as always. And I want to start with a comment that came out of the Kansas City Chamber meeting yesterday when Tim Cowden said this.
There's a narrative, and I understand where the narrative is coming from, that this is a violation of the border truce or an example of the border war. We disagree with that. We look at this as really a border solution.
That, of course, in reference to the Chiefs and the Royals. How would you respond to that, Mr. Mayor?
I mean, I disagree, and I have great respect for Tim and I guess the group of people who assembled. But, Pete, let's, one part of what we've learned from the Trump era and I guess the Mamdani era is that people want truth and authenticity in politics. Is there any person in this whole region who doesn't think that there is a battle between incentives in both states right now? Every other week on the news, there's a story of, well, Kansas will give them $1.7 billion, so Missouri passes a law that pays for half of a stadium for $1.5 billion, so they're at $800 million. How much will Clay County give versus Kansas City versus Jackson County versus Johnson County? I mean, it's obviously a border war incentive battle. It is obviously what everybody actually was trying to get rid of, which is to say that, and I agree with the logic of why we came up with the truce some years ago, which was that when you get in a race on incentives, when there will be no new net economic activity for the region, then the loss is sustained by the taxpayers. I'm not becoming Pat Toohey of the Show Me Institute, but on this regard, he isn't wrong. And the reason that you know that is because both teams have continued to say they're going to stay in the Kansas City metro area. So in terms of new economic activity, you're not actually, you'll get new, but it's not going to be versus that would have come from somewhere else. So, look, I don't take it personally. I don't take offense to it, but I am going to be real with it to the voters and note that there was legislation passed in the Missouri legislature a few weeks ago so that they can compete with the legislation passed in the Kansas legislature that was going to save the teams money if they moved. That's what's happening. Kansas City, North Kansas City, and Johnson County are all in conversations right now to try to shift arguably more taxpayer dollars to support stadiums. And the reason we're in that is because somebody else is doing it the same. This is a classic prisoner's dilemma for an economist. And so it is a problem with what was once the border war truce. And my biggest challenge with the border war truce is this, and saying that this is different or this is an exception. If you create an exception for everything you think is cool or unique, you don't actually have a truce at all. If I'm saying, Pete, I'm going to respect this, that, or the other thing, except when I have my fingers crossed behind my back, then, it's not a real one. And that's too bad, but, heck, that's classic economics and how humans have interacted for as long as we've been around.
So now we sit here and we wait. I'm hearing that the Kansas Star Bond offer is expected to be extended here in the not-too-distant future. So we kick the can down the road further. And as the mayor of Kansas City, as you've noted many times in recent weeks, you've got a lot of other things that you need to be working on right now. But it looks like whether you like it or not, this is not going anywhere. So, is there anything you can do to expedite the timeline on all of this?
I mean, look, there are maybe a few distinct things I can do. One of the most obvious ones, which I think probably a growing percentage of your listeners and, frankly, people on the left, right, and in the middle in this region would say, is to say you get out of the sweepstakes. And to, kind of throw up your hands and say, you know what, we've done what we'll do, but y'all got to figure it out from there. That is an approach. That is an aggressive one and an ambitious one, but frankly, it's one that, people as disparate as Casey Tenants and former Missouri gubernatorial candidate Bill Eigel, a conservative Republican, have proposed. I'm not at that position. I don't think that is the right play. I do think that large venues belong in major American cities. Growing cities have them. Growing and important cities have big and major events. That's why we stay in the discussion. But I think it is regrettable that it seems that this is a chat that continues to not have 9 lives. I don't know how many lives it's on right now. Kansas City's put compelling offers in front of our teams. I think that those are compelling enough that, they're a good story for sticking around. I understand that the teams have the opportunity to do as much research as they like, but I don't know if the extension is a good thing.
Mayor Lucas is joining us on KCMO. And, you've heard some on the team side say, hey, listen, we were rejected by the voters, so now we've got to kind of do our due diligence. And I understand that from their perspective. At the same time, what is that fine line between doing due diligence, but also respecting the taxpayers on both sides of the state line and those who are in charge of a lot of other things on both sides of the state line beyond figuring out who's playing baseball and football where?
There is going to be a book written on this someday by somebody who doesn't give a flattering portrayal of what occurred. Now, look, were the original flaws, the original sins in some places versus others? I do think that if you go way back, Jackson County was a very difficult negotiating partner. If we're going back to the circuit, I think 2023 time frame when the teams are trying to say, let's have a clear deal, that led to a very short time window on a campaign. There were decisions made throughout that I think a lot of people have disagreements with, but nonetheless, state legislatures acting in two different special sessions and two states with lots of other issues, the amount of attention. I mean, I don't know if this is the sort of thing that people necessarily want government agencies to do. That being said, I would say this to the people. A lot of people say you should do everything else, but a whole lot of people ask me about it. And you've been talking about this for a while, too. And you can read ratings and look at the number of clicks and all of that. People engage with this. This is one time where I'm not going to knock, be it, Keatsman, Fesco, whomever in the world. People are interested and people care. And so, look, I'd love for them to care about a bunch of other things that I post and talk about every day. But the teams are big business. They're important. That's part of why we're talking about real money for them. But I do think it'll be good when everybody gets to move forward with what's next. I certainly hope that's in Kansas City. I think that would be good for the entire region at a time where you're seeing cities build more stuff that's interesting and exciting for people. But we'll see what happens.
Mayor Lucas is here on KCMO. You mentioned him earlier. You made the Mamdani reference. He's the guy who won the Democrat primary in New York City in their mayoral race. And, you alluded to something that he has been in favor of here yesterday on your social media. The only, I think, opinion I saw from you on that was that being a fan of accessible and free transit is good for all American cities. But the broader question is this. You're seeing major American cities in this country pick further and further left mayors, and this guy's the favorite now to be the next mayor. As somebody who considers himself a more moderate Democrat in a Midwest major American city, is this a good thing for your preferred political party to see this leftward movement in major cities where, frankly, there's little evidence it's working on behalf of the people?
Well, I was with the question until you got to the last point. Look, you're seeing different trends in different American cities. In San Francisco, they elected a pretty clear moderate, replacing the prior mayor with whom I had a relationship, but I know the current one. In Houston, they went a more moderate, even probably conservative Democrat approach. And in New York City, I think we'll continue to see this was a Democratic electorate, a fairly heavily Democratic, it's all Democratic electorate, but fairly progressive electorate in New York City. A few things, and I put this on my social media today, which was a voter breakdown from our public safety sales tax. The public safety sales tax in Kansas City passed 60-40. It did its worst downtown, midtown, and the traditional east side of Kansas City are probably most progressive areas. That said, certainly for our east siders, those are the people most impacted by crime. There are sometimes different views for how things should be solved. If you're somebody who lives on acreage, let's say in the northland of the city, versus somebody who is living in an apartment in the core of the city and perhaps has known both victims and assailants of certain things. And so the way I see it is this. Urban cores are no different than states or no different than anything else, which is that you need people that can actually speak to a balance of the issues. I have been critiqued in my career for seeming not too dedicated to one side or the other, being a flip-flopper, being anything under the sun. What I call it is, frankly, just balance. It is absolutely, very simply balance. Some to my right this week are blasting me because they say you're attacking businesses for certain crime issues. I'm saying yes, if they allow for numerous code of ordinance violations on their property, if they're the ones flouting rules all the time, but they have unlicensed clubs that should be punished, but there should also be jails for the individuals in them. I don't think that there is a pure left approach to where cities are going or a pure right approach, which people would have been saying 6 months ago. I think that electorates are looking at balance in many ways. Who is most charismatic? And I think that's how decisions are made. I don't think I won my race just because of, my political identities. I think I hit the flesh. I was out on the streets, and I think that's still what wins.
But here's the other thing I noticed on some of the trends in New York City and also in this public safety sales tax information that you shared. And that is, to me, the more progressive parts of the city are preferring, obviously, more liberal approaches to public policy. And that also kind of lines up with your whiter parts of the liberal constituency. I mean, you look at New York and blacks and Latinos largely preferred Andrew Cuomo over Mamdani. It was the white progressive class that preferred Mamdani, and you see some of that, too, in this public safety tax, downtown, midtown, whiter part of Kansas City saying, we don't want taxes for the police. So I think that there's that going on right now within the political party. Do you see that as well?
There is a clear, and I don't know if this is the show for it, but what the heck, you asked about it. The Democratic Party coalition is fascinating. A few things particularly. You hit the nail on the head on that point. The other thing, if you look at the Trump election, and President Trump isn't President Trump just because of a bunch of radical conservatives, right? You saw growth in blacks. You saw growth in Latinos. Still lost those groups largely, but you're seeing movement for him in ways that didn't happen previously. And you are seeing, I won't call it a big divorce, but a very different view in your total black vote outcome versus those of white progressives. It has always been known for those who watch politics. Your black voter base is actually in many ways more conservative than, let's say, your white progressive base. And you start to see that. You can see that in the political leaders themselves, Jim Clyburn versus AOC, right? And granted, I can go with people the same age, but you probably still see the same breakdown. As you go to younger candidates and voters, that is minimized a bit. But I do think that is going to be the big question of American cities in the future. There's a reason that Eric Adams is the current mayor of New York City. And part of that was a coalition of black voters matched largely with moderate white voters and others. He has never been the darling of white progressives. That's why the New York general election will be at least somewhat interesting. I do think Mamdani wins. But I think if you look at the next presidential election, it'll be interesting. Joe Biden was able to win the Democratic primary largely because of the support of black voters and some other groups, traditional older white union folks and others, white progressives being somewhere different. This will be the key question as we come to 2028 in Democratic Party politics.
Last thing, Mr. Mayor, in the next minute, of course, there was a big press conference this week, 35th and Prospect, in the wake of a lot of violent crime that happened in that part of Kansas City. I saw that you've got some of these businesses in the area that are no longer going to be 24 hours a day open. How much can that actually help solve the issues in that part of Kansas City?
Secondary effects. It's a doctrine that happens a lot of times, and frankly, all of us know it. Pete, if somebody wanted to open a nightclub behind your house, you probably wouldn't like it. Why? Not because you hate clubs or dancing, but because people are going to hang out late. Even if they said they could have sound buffers to protect it, there'll be people hanging out on the parking lots. They'll be doing all types of things. This is something that happens in every community. It's fundamentally why we have zoning laws, is to make sure that you don't have those detrimental effects on a neighborhood environment. What we are asking is very simply this, right? Businesses need to follow the rules. They can't rack up 100 ordinance violations about unlawful sales, trash, all these other sorts of things, and not have some repercussions. And so we're suggesting that because everybody needs to be a part of keeping things safe. You or I, whatever community you live in, I live in Kansas City, we can be cited for letting our grass grow to 3 feet tall, right? This to me is no different. You got to take care of things as being part of a neighborhood. And I think that's going to be an important step, yes, of how we can be safer long term.
And we'll keep rooting for new prosecutor Melissa Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do appreciate your time as always.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. That is Quinton Lucas on KCMO Talk Radio.